I'll get used to this eventually. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending, and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Licensing Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the Licensing Committee meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of such images or sound recordings is not under the control of the Council. I would like to move now then to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. We've got apologies from Councillors Billin, Councillor Perec and Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Perec and Councillor Wheeler are being substituted here today by Councillors Butler and Wells. So thank you very much for stepping in. And the second item of everyone else is present. The second item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? No, thank you, brilliant. And the third item then is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 2nd of November 2022. I think there's only one person that was present at those, which is Councillor Mallender. So would you care to propose those as an accurate record? I was hoping that Councillor Sims was going to be present because he was the only other person, but he doesn't know.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, I think I was here because if you look on page 2, the final paragraph, it says Councillor Butler asked if customers. So if I asked the question, I think I was here. And I do vaguely remember being here. So if you'd like me to second,
that would be very much appreciated.
I'd be happy to do so. So I'm happy to second. It definitely says that. So that could be
You weren't mentioned on the attendance.
No, that's right.
So
but, I won't take it first. Sure, you've read the minute. Absolutely.
I think you're happy to. No, brilliant. Thank you. And we'll. Does everyone agree that they accept those as an accurate record? Yes, nodding all around. Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll sign those off as an accurate record, and then we can move to the the only substantive item that's on the agenda, which is the new statement of licensing policy. So I'll hand over to Jeff Carpenter to introduce the team and talk us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and welcome everyone to the Licensing Committee. I'm Jeff Carpenter. I'm the Service Manager for Public Protection within neighbourhoods, and I'm sort of nominated role for this committee. I manage environmental health, community safety, and licensing and strategic housing. Within the environmental health team, we have community safety and licensing as a team. Martin Hickey to my left here is the Principal Officer for Community Safety and Licensing. And Dave Roberts, then right next to me here, is our Senior Licensing Officer. So he's generally speaking our main individual with regards to licensing. So license committees, we don't have that many. We don't need to have that many each year. Generally speaking, they are used to adopt and revise new policies. And that is the principal purpose of today's meeting, which will be around the statement of licensing policy. I think next year will be taxes. I think the taxi policy is due next year. So yeah, I'm going to pass over straight away then over to Dave to run through the statement of licensing policy for you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I understand that hopefully most of you have had your licensing committee training. That was held a couple of weeks back. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you understand what it's all about. And hopefully you won't have to put that training into much use over the next few years. We're here tonight to look at the statement of licensing policy for Rushcliffe Borough Council, which is a requirement of Section 5 of the Licensing Act of 2003. The way that this current policy, or the next policy, is coming to being is a group exercise with every licensing authority within the county, where prior to the policy being adopted, we have a series of meetings where we agree a general policy which fits every authority throughout the county. And then each individual licensing authority makes the policy fit for their particular location and region. Now, the reason that we have a licensing policy, number one, is because the Licensing Act says that we have to have one, and we have to have one every 5 years. And January the 7th of next year is the day that we must publish that policy. The policy itself, in very simple layman's terms, is how Rushcliffe Borough Council intend over the next 5-year period to manage the requirements of the Licensing Act of 2003, which covers the sale of alcohol, regulated entertainment, and late night refreshment. Please feel free at any time whilst I'm talking, if there are any questions, then please feel free to ask. Through the chair, sorry, through the chair. You should all have a copy of the proposed licensing statement, and there have been a number of changes from the statement from 2019 to the current one, and those are mainly due to new legislation, changes in the what's known as the Section 182 guidance in relation to the Licensing Act, and changes to the communities that we all live and work in. So in relation to the policy, a number of these items have been suggested by other authorities around Nottinghamshire, and they were placed into our policy and then put out for consultation over a 6-week period. And during that 6-week consultation period, we only had one representation in relation to that, and that was from Public Health. So if we can move into the policy, if my copy shows additions to the policy. Yep. Yep. And the first change comes at, from my copy, 4.2. And that first inclusion starts from a paragraph beginning, however. Yeah, thank you. These paragraphs tend to relate to the Director of Public Health as a statutory consultee for licence applications. There are a group of organisations known as responsible authorities which have to be consulted when a new application for a premises licence is submitted. Although the Public Health is a responsible authority, in relation to that, a lot of the information that they can submit isn't relevant towards the 4 licensing authorities, although it can be combined with other evidence used in the 4 licensing authorities, 4 licensing objectives. Okay. So in addition, so the new sections which have been added are 4.3, 4.4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I'll take it that everybody's had time to.
Dave, can I just ask,
Yeah, sure.
is your intention to go through and allow questions at each of the amendments, or did you want to go through the whole thing and then take questions?
I think preferably if we go through the whole thing first, then we take questions at the end.
Fine. Is everyone content with that? Or?
Thank you. It is quite a lengthy document, so if we work through it fully first and then we'll go to questions. So yeah, to 4.9, they are all new inclusions. Yeah, and they're sections which are highlighted areas within the borough with relatively higher levels of alcohol-related harm. And that doesn't necessarily mean harm through violence. That could mean harm through excessive use of alcohol. And that is mainly how this information is gathered by public health. So moving on now to 5.3, this is an inclusion. Responsible authorities of public bodies which are representations in relation to an application, request reviews and make representations with regard. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Responsible authorities can make a representation in relation to the application, and they can only make that representation on one or all four of the licensing objectives, and they are the prevention of crime and disorder, prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the prevention of harm to children. Public health isn't one of the four licensing objectives. The next inclusion is at 6.2. Where substantial changes to premises should be dealt with by ways of a new application. Premises licenses can be varied, and they can be varied either through a minor variation or a significantly major variation. The 182 guidance now suggests that all major variations where a premises license, the premises is increased in size or the particular area of service is increased in size, that should be done through a new license rather than a variation. The next section is 6.4.
Councillor Malaby.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. So I know we we're going to go through it and get questions at the end, but I think some of them might get a bit stacked up. So I'm not doing this for devilment, honestly. So in the licensing training, there was lots of reference made to very precise use of language and don't use vague terminology. So what's a substantial change to a premises?
Okay, so the two variations within the Licence Act, Section 34 and Section 41. There is another section which is to deal with what's known as a designated premises supervisor. The Section 35 variation is a major variation where you would be increasing the size of the premises. So the footprint of that premise has gone from being able to hold 100 people to being able to hold 150 people. So therefore, that is what would be called in the license in terms of a major variation. A minor variation would be one where there's been a movement of furniture and the bar has just been moved a short distance and it's not increased the sales area.
Okay, so for example, if in Central Avenue, West Bridgeford, one of the premises there that sort of has late night bar in downstairs, opened the upstairs as a bar as well, that would be a major or
Not necessarily so, because that particular area could fall within the existing license anyway. Because a lot of premises, they do license multiple floors. So the ground floor and the first floor may well fall within that particular licensed area. If it isn't, if they want to include that area in the current license, then that would be a major variation.
All right, thanks. We do get quite a lot of issues from time to time along the Central Avenue stretch with all the various bars and things there.
Yeah. Okay. Next section is section 6.4, with the addition of the applicants are encouraged to use gov.uk to submit online applications, or if available, the council's own online applications process. We're currently in the process of, through our IT suppliers, installing software which will allow residents and customers to apply for licenses through our website instead of going to what's commonly known as the gov.uk website. The gov.uk website has been up and running for a substantial amount of time, and it is nearing the end of its life for licensing use. The government are looking at rejigging it, but they say they won't make any changes till at least 2020. Directly through the council's website. The next change comes at 613. And we've previously spoken about this, about the Doctor of Public Health. Is there responsible for making representations? However, those representations must be in line with the 4 licensing authorities. Objectives, right. Well, 613. Yeah. And obviously the Director of Public Health wants to see the health of the general population become better. And one of the ways that they do that is through a matrix that is used by public health to obtain information in relation to the health of people within Rushcliffe. And that matrix is available online. I do believe there is a link within the policy, but you probably won't be able to see it as live on the paper document. And it does highlight certain areas within Rushcliffe where there is an indicator of the alcohol causing harm or illness to members of the public. The next section is section 616. This is a complete new inclusion of the entitlement to work in the UK. I'd like to claim credit for this because I was the one that brought this into the policy. The Licensing Act for premises licenses and for personal licenses, and through your training recently, hopefully you understand what a premises license is and the requirement to have a personal license to operate that premises license. Under those 2 categories, you're required since Brexit to prove your entitlement to work and reside in the UK. And the way that we do that currently is, have you got a passport? You can produce a passport, or alternatively, if you aren't a UK citizen, you can supply what's known as a share code, an immigration share code, which you obtain through the Home Office, which allows the licensing section to look at you as an individual and your right and entitlement to live and work and what type of work you can undertake within the UK. This doesn't just apply to alcohol licensing, it also applies to other areas of licensing as well, where that particular Home Office share code is supplied to us for various other reasons. The next section is 7.2, which is a reference to community protection notices, which is an addition in relation to that particular section in relation to antisocial behaviour. And examples of that obviously are the parks that we have, possible areas of concern in relation to homeless people, sleeping rough, etc. As long as it's alcohol related, of course. The next section that we move to is section 712 through to 713. And this is an update in relation to something which has been in the press over the last couple of years, and it relates to the spiking of alcohol, or spiking of drinks, and the spike in by use of syringes in mainly in pubs, clubs and bars. Fortunately, within Rushcliffe, we haven't seen a great deal of this, but we feel that it should be included as because it often targets specific members of our community, and that be females. Fortunately, like I say, we haven't had a great deal of reports of this particular incident, but it's something that should be in the policy because it does affect people when it does take place. So we move to section 720, and that is a rewording of the pool of licensing conditions.
So I was just going to say there's one good bit right at the end of that paragraph that I don't know if fellow councillors are aware of, is the Ask for Angela initiative, which is a way of people asking for help in a bar. It's a really good idea.
I can expand on that. The Ask Angela, when I go to a pub watch meter, I go into a pub and it's just staff that are present and not managers. I always ask them, do you know who Angela is? And you'd be surprised how many actually say yes. If a female comes to the bar and says to a member of staff, can I see Angela? That is a trigger word, or should be a trigger word to that member of staff to say that that particular person is looking for help because of something that has taken place within those premises. And then that particular person should then be taken to a place of safety within the building, or if not within that building, to another building elsewhere where the police or an appropriate agency can be contacted in relation to the help that they are looking for. Thank you.
As I understand it, Dave, the additions here are to introduce additional training, mandatory training for staff, aren't they? So that's an addition to the previous policy to incorporate those
That's correct.
extra training requirements.
720. So I'll move on to 720 as I said previously. Pool of conditions. If you happen to be a license holder for a licensed premises, on your premises license, there'll be a list of conditions that you must adhere to while operating. The Annex 1 conditions are mainly mandatory, and they refer mainly to the supply of alcohol. The Annex 2 conditions are conditions which are normally agreed between the licence holder and various other agencies. They could be the police, they could be Rushcliffe Borough Council as a responsible authority, they could be the environmental health, they could be the fire service. And those, there is a pool of conditions that we as licensing officers use so that we get a standardisation of wording across the licensing regime, so that a licence issued today in Rushcliffe Borough Council, if somebody came in from another borough or another authority, looked at that licence, they would understand what those conditions mean. We move now to 725. Sorry, 726, my mistake. And this has been an addition which has been requested by a responsible authority, and that is Nottinghamshire Police, in relation to counter-terrorism. Run and hide and use the phone is what they say. Don't become involved. Run, hide and tell. This also goes along with some legislation which isn't in law yet, but may well be coming into law next year. In what form, we're not quite sure yet, because there's still a lot of work to be done on it. And that is a piece of law that is commonly called Martin's Law. And this came about after the 2017 bombing at the Manchester Arena and through the public inquiry which was held. Martin's Law doesn't prevent terrorism. It's there to tell people who hold an event of more than 100 people what to do in the case of one, and what to do in the case of it's successful and there are injured people laying around, walking around, and what they should have in place at their premises or their event. Because if you think that 100 people fit quite easily into an average pub, you look at the Christmas light switch on Central Avenue, and you can have upwards of 4,000 people there. And we've seen previously, thankfully not in this area, vehicles being used for terrorist ends. I'll move on now to 728. This is in relation to cumulative impact assessment, CIAs. These were introduced in the Licensing Act of 2003 by the Policing and Crime Act of 2017. And basically what that means, a cumulative impact assessment is, are there too many pubs in one area? Too many bars, too many off licenses. We, as an licensing authority, do not have a cumulative impact assessment because no one has yet said to us, there's too many bars, there's too much alcohol. So I'd like it to stay that way because I think that we, as a licensing authority, manage the licensed premises within the borough very well. Okay, closure notices at 7:32. Strangely enough, there was one of these issued 2 weeks ago to a pub within the borough. Okay, this has been an addition again on behalf of the police and one or two other of the authorities around the county, and it relates in relation to where premises are in breach of their licensing conditions. And a section 19 closure order basically tells the license holder, the manager or the designated premises supervisor that they've got 7 days to put it right. If after 7 days they're still serving alcohol, they're committing an offence if they haven't put it right. The one that I referred to within the borough that had been served, the breaches of the conditions for that particular premises were put right within 3 days. It's a very effective tool, and it premises that change hands frequently tend to get looked at more because of the type of individuals that take over the premises and take over and take over. And moving on to 746, reviews and expedited review. Expedited reviews is an addition on request of the police, because the police are mainly the authority that would request an expedited review. And I take it from your training, you understand what a review of a license is, hopefully. That would be where at least 3 members would be present whilst the license conditions or the breaches of those conditions is reviewed, and you are given a chance to decide on what action will be taken, whether that be additional conditions, conditions removed, a license suspended, or ultimately the license revoked. Yes, Councillor.
Is that in effect a hearing then? If that happens,
Yes,
you'd have
that is.
3 or more. You'd have to convene a special.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So fortunately, I think the last one that we had was in 2018.
And would that not have to come in front of a full
No,
committee? So you
no,
just
subcommittee.
a subcommittee.
Is expedited quickly. Is that?
Sorry.
Is that
Councillor Regan.
done quick?
Yeah, and just sorry,
Councillor Regan's got.
sorry, Nigel.
It's a question for the chair. I should have probably stated at the beginning that my principal income comes from a property that I own that is licensed. I reviewed the documents before the meeting, and I don't see anything that puts me in a position of conflict. But I'd like to ask the chair whether he thinks that is a potential.
You're a license holder.
No, I'm not. So I own the premises. I own the property. So I own a property company. The property company. The property company is leased to a business that my wife owns, and she is the license holder.
I suppose what you're declaring there is a non-prejudicial interest of sorts. We'll record that. Thank you for declaring that, albeit.
So my question is, should I vote on this or not?
Yeah.
If it was a subcommittee, that'd be different.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine, because what we're looking at here is amendments to an existing policy, most of which we've not gone through them all yet, but most of which are regulatory in nature. So I'm content that you, having declared that I'm happy for you to vote on it.
Thank you. And I have reviewed it, and I don't see anything in there that is potential conflict.
So thank you for declaring it. So Chewings.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. You mentioned that there'll be 3 members who'll be selected for that committee. Who would select that? How they'd be selected? That's the question really is.
That would be done through democratic services.
But those individuals have to have completed the training that we did a month or so ago. If any member that hasn't completed that training would not be able to be on the hearing.
And I'm assuming that would be as a, in those cases, it would be because there's a need to do it ASAP. So it will be whoever's available off the committee, volunteers from
who's available. And I suspect the issue around declarations of interest would be a relevant factor at that point.
Thank you. Back over to you there.
Thank you. In that reviews and expedited review, section 748 is an inclusion, and this relates mainly to the police, where a premises has suffered serious crime and disorder, and the police want to apply for a summary or expedited review. In other words, they want it done quickly, rather than letting the premises continue trading. They want that review done quickly so that either they can put additional conditions onto the license, remove the designating premises supervisor, remove the license holder and have him replaced with someone else, or alternatively suspend or revoke the license. I'll move next to 752, which is alcohol delivery services. This is a large inclusion and comes about as a result of COVID. All the licensing authorities around the county found that during COVID, lots and lots of people, because they couldn't get to the pub, started supplying alcohol from home. And within the borough, we did have a number, and we still do have a number of businesses which supply alcohol of various kinds, mainly of the cocktail types that you see at parties. And this particular inclusion covers the ordering and the dispatching and the delivery of that alcohol, and what's required from the license holder and the operators at the time in relation to identifying the person who the alcohol is ordered by. So if it's an internet sales, then there must be a declaration that person is 18 years or over, and when delivered, that alcohol must be delivered to a person of age of 18 or over. I'll move now to section 7.53, payment licenses. This is another inclusion because of COVID. This came about in the Business and Planning Act of 2020, where premises were opening, but they weren't open fully. And the government decided to introduce a system of pavement licenses, which were originally dealt with by the county council. They moved that responsibility down to local authority level. And the pavement licenses in relation to that particular act allow you to place furniture on the highway. And you can sell your wares. If it's alcohol, you obviously have to have a premises license. If it's hot dogs and burgers, it can be hot dogs and burgers. Next inclusion is 8.5. Yeah, safeguarding of children. This has just been retitled.
Councillor Williams.
With that on the pavement licensing, and you going on one of the other sections around from the question from council manager about major and minor alterations to a license, if somebody was then going to for a pavement, would that impact as well on that kind of license area of licensing?
No, mainly because the sale of alcohol is a licensable activity, but the consumption isn't. So you can basically drink anywhere you want within legal bounds, of course. So alcohol that's purchased in a bar can then be consumed outside that bar. There is another small addition to the Business and Planning Act of 2020, which allows premises which have on licenses only where alcohol can be sold for consumption on the premises up until March of 2024. Those licenses are extended to allow them to supply alcohol for consumption off the premises. So if you an example might be a bar on Central Avenue. Their license is purely an on license, but the new regulations allow them to sell alcohol for consumption at tables they placed on the pavement. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Next section is section 8, the safeguarding of safeguarding of children. Apologies. That's just a change of titles, I believe.
Yeah, 8.5.
Yeah, yeah. And then at 8.5, this is an inclusion, quite a lengthy one, through to 8.7. And this is in relation to the safeguarding of basically female staff and customers. And the way that licensed premises should behave in relation to issues surrounding females.
I have just one question that David made. On reading that, I understand that was to do with making sure the welfare of their staff, that their female staff particularly, are able to get home safely. And how is that checked up on? In terms of the onus is on the premises to either get them a cab or make sure that they can get home safely in some way, which I understood from the policy. But how is that checked on by us as the licensing authority, and how do we make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to? I suppose that's a more generic question, really.
Yeah, that's done mainly through licensing visits by myself or through Nottinghamshire Police. They have a licensing section who deal with various aspects of premises licenses, and where there is a policy in place within a particular company in relation to females on the premises, whether they be employees, visitors, customers, etc. They would check up on those policies.
Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. Just follow on question from that is, so the female workers, how do they know what they are entitled to? Who's going to tell them if their employer doesn't tell them that they're entitled to being put in a taxi and whatever? How do they know? And then also, if they have a problem, how do they know and where do they go to raise that as a problem? Because they might not feel that they can raise it with their employer. What is their protection? What is there to support them and make sure they can report problems?
Okay, so in relation to that question, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Nottinghamshire brought this particular aspect forward in relation to the vulnerability of females, whether they be customers or whether they be staff. In relation to making staff aware, obviously that would be down to the particular company, the bar, the pub, the organisation. And when it comes to reporting anything, then the normal reporting process is through Nottinghamshire Police.
I'm assuming, following on from Councillor Solomon's question, that would be covered, something that will be covered on licensing visits.
Yep.
That you'll be, as well as talking to the managers, that we actually talk to and intervene with the staff to ask these questions. Is that correct?
These are issues which will be raised at a pub watch meeting if the premises are involved in the pub watch.
But the pub watch meetings usually have the licensee or the manager present. Do we make efforts to reach out to those staff, which is what Councillor Solomon was getting to, or do the police make efforts to reach out to those staff so that we can ensure that those messages are being passed on and not just accepting licensees saying that they comply with this? If you know what I mean, I think that's what you're getting at, isn't it, Councillor?
Yeah,
It is, because the most vulnerable here is a young 18-year-old girl who has their first job in a pub, no idea what to expect, no idea what their entitlements are, no idea that their boss should or shouldn't be getting them a taxi home at night. If that boss doesn't tell them, how are they going to find that information out? If they're feeling vulnerable, and the statistics for young girls, 18, 19, 20, having problems in a workplace is really quite frightening. How are they supported? You say they can go online to Nottinghamshire Police and report that. I mean, I'm a lot older than an 18-year-old girl, but I wouldn't know to do that.
Through the Police and Crime Commissioner, there's an amount of publications available, which is regularly distributed by the police and by the licensing authority at pub watch meetings or during visits. We also do late night enforcements as well, where we'll team up with the police licensing officers and visit premises to see exactly how the situation is within that in particular premises.
Can I just follow that up? There seems like there's a gap here. I think we've identified. Can we make a recommendation to go to Caroline's office, PCC, about some follow-up literature, something put in place to expand the programme she's brought in to support these vulnerable girls?
Yeah, we should come to that in a minute. I think we need to be careful about not to go off tack. I think in terms of the policy. The policy here is to ensure that all businesses within licensed businesses within the borough operate within the policy. The policy demonstrates that they ought to have regard to safeguarding of women and children within the policy. That's what this meeting is about. So when we issue a license, when an application is made, we want to be able to be satisfied that a business is taking these issues into consideration. That's the point of a policy. Okay, so the burden is then on the business to ensure that they comply with the policy. It is not on the responsibility of the council then to go checking on who's being told what. The role of the council is to adopt a policy which ensures that these issues are taken seriously by licensed premises within the borough.
I get exactly what the issue is. If I can just sort of summarise what I think you're about to say, we've included this now in the policy to ensure that the onus is then on businesses to safeguard their staff. That's what we're looking at here, to put that onus onto the businesses, which will then enable us as the licensing authority to follow up on that. And I think what you're asking for is the reassurance from the team here that they will act upon that and actually reach out to those staff and inquire and make sure that that is happening from the licensees. Is that correct?
That is absolutely, because I know we're trying to do a job here by getting the paperwork in place, but what really matters is those people are protected. That is our real job ultimately, because otherwise we're just putting paper in place for the sake of it. We put paper in place to make a difference, and that's what this is about. Yeah.
Thank you. Completely agree with that sentiment. I think it's an important inclusion that we have in here, which is the first step in making people comply with that. And I think if we could just have your assurances as a team that that is something that you will actually, speak to the staff about when on your visits, I think that would satisfy.
It is something that we do discuss at pub watch meetings or on enforcement visits, and it is raised quite frequently. Because as you said, Councillor, the 18-year-old never been in that environment before, completely just does not understand that particular world, because the pub world is a different world. And that brings the amendments and changes to the current policy to an end.
Thank you. I completely understand what you were saying, Solomon, because as a parent whose daughter, 18-year-old daughter, did work in a pub for a while, I share your sentiments entirely. Thank you. I've got one question I wanted to raise, but before I do that, is anyone else? Yes, Councillor Greycock.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to wait till the end of the amendments before making this point. To provide a bit of context, my father was a publican for most of his working life. Castle Rock Brewery. He's Chief Executive of the Society of Independent Brewers. Very passionate about beer and pubs in the industry, something that he's impressed upon me. But unlike Councillor Reagan, he no longer works in the industry, doesn't have an establishment, and I would encourage everyone to visit Councillor Reagan's fantastic establishment in Bingham, by the way. So he's retired, no immediate family work in the industry, so I don't have a direct interest at the moment. However, I do want to kind of question this objective a little bit around public health and the correlation or causality between alcohol-related harm and licensing of pubs, bars and clubs and community venues. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that drinking at home and indeed tanking up before going out and the price of alcohol within supermarkets is a far greater cause of alcohol-related harm. I think we have to consider the fact that pubs have substantial energy bills, taxation placed upon them, and of course, through the pubco system, many tenancies are forced to buy beer at prices that are inflated, to the extent that a study in August showed that about 25 pubs a week are closing. So not only, as the policy states, do pubs contribute to the attractiveness of the area, do they create a number of different types of jobs and contribute to economic development, but they also have a role in community development, in local services, and they help tackle social isolation, loneliness, contributing to mental health and well-being, and indeed intergenerational interaction, the reinforcement of families and community networks. So I suppose my concern is that responsible moderate drinking in a pub environment actually contributes to public health and isn't necessarily a direct contributing to alcohol-related harm. So what assurances can we have from these changes to the policy that pubs, particularly in my area, in areas like my ward, rural areas like my ward, are going to be protected and continue to be granted licenses? Thank you.
My question was along a similar vein, so I'll ask that at the same time, get you to respond, because it was to do with the public health amendments at 4.2 to 9. I've noted that your ward is actually not one of the ones that was highlighted as a at-risk drinking area, Councillor Grocott.
No,
So
but East Bridgeford is, and I know Councillor Sims isn't here, and that is a similar rural location.
it is, and it's noted, and that was part of my question was around, and I know I asked this before the meeting started, but was around how they came up with those particular areas, as they seemed a bit random and covered most of West Bridgeford, and the evidence that they said came from a survey in 2018. So I understand that, that as a result of that, it's only encouraging, the policy change is only to encourage applicants to consider what they're doing to mitigate risks. But what is the intention, and do we have any sort of extra burden on licence applicants from particularly those areas because of this public health report?
I'll start, Chair, but Dave or Martin may want to come in. So public health is not a licensing objective as it stands right now. Dave made quite clear what those licensing objectives are: public safety.
Public safety. There are crime and disorder. Yeah. The crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the prevention of harm to children.
So public health is not one of them. So we nor public health can require any stringent conditions at all on any licensed premises, whether they be in your ward or anyone or anywhere else on public health grounds. It's purely on a case-by-case basis, and all they're truly trying to seek is identify areas where there appears to be a correlation between public health and alcohol, and to request and really to start a conversation, really, as much as anything, and to engage and raise awareness with licensed premises in those areas in terms of what they can do to mitigate and reduce alcohol-related harm. That's all it is.
Yeah. I did notice from a lot of the data that was submitted to us by Public Health that some particular areas where they said there was a high instance of illness caused by alcohol or alcohol-related illnesses, there was only one alcohol outlet within that particular location. And that says to me, well, is it that pub? No, it's not. The alcohol consumption is more than likely taking place at home. The pricing of alcohol, unfortunately, does not come under the Licensing Act, and there is no control over that whatsoever.
Can I just make a point as well? The previous policy also had something about public health, but it wasn't as detailed, so it's not a new matter. This is just tweaked slightly because of new data from public health.
Councillor Grocott, you wanted to come back on that?
Just a small point. I think in the cases of serious alcohol abuse and harm, it's difficult to map out the correlation between drinking at home and drinking in the establishment. But from my own observations, when people are in that perhaps more acute level of alcohol problems, being able to access a pub can actually help them, and can actually be a place where they can seek help. So I just think, I know what we're saying, I know it's not going to have a major impact and it's not an objective, but I think when in asking licenses to consider that, licensees to consider that, what powers do they have? What can they really do to tackle some of those particular alcohol-related issues? Absolutely, if it's leading to antisocial behaviour and public disturbances and things like that. But I just don't really see what role pubs can play in addressing public health concerns regarding that. And other than obviously consistently serving to very, very drunk people, for example.
Thank you. Any other questions to Councillor Thatcher?
Thank you, Chair. Same subject, really. Going back to the data that identified harm in these areas of Rushcliffe. I'm a ward member for Ruddington, and it just says Ruddington South on there. Is this identifying one pub? Because we've got 7 in there. I know we're not a big village, but we are quite a popular.
I don't think this is identifying pubs as such. It's identifying areas of the borough that have health-related issues related to alcohol. So that could just be a number of people that have conditions that might involve alcohol. Or it could be a number of ambulance calls to street drinking, for example. Or it could, it's those clusters of health related issues rather than actually where premises are, is my understanding.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. Thank you, Jim.
If I could just come in, the data that's supplied isn't our data. It comes from public health. How they obtain that data that is basically down to them. It's from hospitals, it's from your GP. It's not identifiable data as to a particular individual. It's just a person in a particular area. So it may well be that you live in East Bridgeford, yet you do your drinking in West Bridgeford, or you live in Ruddington and you do your drinking in Bingham. So the data that they supply is their data. It's not the borough's data. It's not our data. So we have to go with what they produce.
Councillor Butler.
Can I just go back to 7.52, the alcohol delivery services? You mentioned it had become noticeable, especially at the time of the pandemic. But it just occurred to me, these regulations, do they also apply, and I assume they do, but I just want clarification really, to, for example, supermarket home shopping? So are they automatic? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Supermarket home delivery, are they covered by all this?
They would do if those conditions were in their license. And like I said, it's mainly only since COVID that we've seen an increase in this particular type of activity of internet sales. It's always been there because you can go to Amazon and you can order yourself a bottle of the finest scotch that you want and it will be delivered to your home address. But COVID particularly, because people couldn't go out and socialise, and they started drinking from home, the entrepreneurs found a gap in the market and they took advantage of it. And in reality, could you blame them? The answer has to be no, you can't blame them because that's what they do for a living. But we can manage that. We manage it by, if you have a license where you're supplying alcohol online, then you get conditions attached to that license that you have to adhere to.
I suppose just one additional question that comes off the back of that. Online retailers, obviously, you were thinking of the likes of Asda and big supermarkets. Other shops are available, which are in our borough. But online retailers could be anywhere in the country. So presumably they have to have a license from the area that they distribute from. Is that correct? So they could be from outside our borough?
No, they don't. They only have to have a license at the premises where the money changes hands. So I'll give you an example of that. There is a wine retailer and wholesaler whose main premises is in the city of Nottingham. They have a distribution depot within Rushcliffe towards Eastleek. Those premises have a license, but they don't need one. But they've had one for the sake of having a license, so they can feel secure. The likes of Amazon, when you order it, the transaction is done through Amazon's headquarters, where the money changes hands. The product gets delivered from somewhere else. They don't require a license.
Thank you for that clarification. Any further questions on the amendments to the policy? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I know we've gone on about the public health, but I was just looking with these areas on for 4.8, and then we've got around 7.25, 7.27, 7.28 on the cumulative impact. Is these kind of crossover between the two? Because we've got Public Health England saying that these areas are got, but we've now kind of going that they've been removed because, or the narrative's been removed because we don't have any of these impact areas, and it's just a bit kind of I'm struck with why 4.8 is in the policy, and with those areas for why it's in the policy, because of course data can change, and and circumstances can change. And of course, when we come round to reviewing this policy, is that list then going to change again? And every policy is going to have a new list because of, and it's not a live document in a sense of constantly getting updated.
So in 2 years, this is valid for 5 years, but in 2 years' time, those areas
Or,
might be
yeah,
radically
or in a
different.
year time and that,
So,
because it's
yeah.
just like we stated in rural areas like it, where it's got Gotham and East Bridgeford aren't going to have as big a cluster or as some of the other places of premises and off lights and stuff like that. So it's just kind of why it's in there though.
As I alluded to previously, is that the data isn't our data, it's from public health. And that data, as I understand it, works on per head of population. So they would perhaps do it to per 1 per 1,000 of the head of population, although in some of the rural areas there aren't 1,000 people in some of the smaller villages and locations. The cumulative impact is in relation to actual licensed premises. It's not in relation to public health figures. It's in relation to the number of bars there are at a particular location where it reaches saturation point, where basically every other premises is a bar, a pub, a restaurant, and the availability of alcohol in that location allows you to go from one to the one to the one to the next to the next to the next. And that is where a cumulative impact assessment would then come in. That's where we would then look at that particular area. And if a premises license application comes in for another bar, we would look at that in greater detail. And we would say, no, there are enough bars here. What you offer is already available at 5 other locations. We're not going to allow it. Or you would say that, I would say. We haven't got any.
Councillor Williams and then Councillor Regan.
I understand what you said about where the data has come from. It's just for why it's in this list is in the policy of these areas, because like I say, it can change. Has it come from public health that they asked for it to this list to go in the policy and that's why it's there, or is it that we kind of got the
So yeah, I'll clarify that. Yeah, the public health are a responsible authority within the meaning of the Licensing Act, and the data that they supply to us and the section within the policy is what they asked for to be in the policy. I must say that's in every other policy in the county, including the city.
Councillor Regan.
Just to build on Councillor Williams' point about listing the areas, is this a national policy or is this just a county policy? Is my first question. Secondly, has any consideration been made to the cost of the premises holders or the license to the cost of premises in terms of insurance or supply? Is this list going to prejudice in any way premises within those areas?
Okay, in relation to the policy, as I said right at the very beginning, it's a requirement of the Licensing Act of 2003 that each individual licensing authority have a policy which must be published every 5 years. However, if anything changes within that 5-year period, you can then revisit the policy, review it, and republish it, and the date starts all over again. This policy isn't a national policy, this is a local policy, although there is one for a generalised policy that was agreed on throughout the county. Each individual policy is fitted for the area in which it relates.
I think what Councillor Regan was asking is if the consultation with public health is a national policy, as in we're complying, we're doing that because we have to.
Yeah. In relation to public health, that is a national requirement.
Does that answer your question?
So not quite. So it's specifically this list. Is the inclusion of this list national And has any consideration been made to the inclusion of this list? So prejudicing the businesses within those areas in terms of insurance, in terms of suppliers, in terms of staffing.
As I said earlier, the inclusion of this is at the request of public health. Yeah, there is no, it has little or no bearing in terms of enforcement. It'll have no bearing in terms of whether we approve or whether we reject any applications whatsoever. The whole point of it is to raise and engage and raise awareness amongst the community and amongst businesses that if you're trying to open a licensed business within one of these areas, you ought to have regard to the fact that there is elevated alcohol-related harm in that area, and you ought to have plans in place, which is what we would check as part of an application process. You ought to have a plan, but it isn't going to have any detrimental impact in any way on any business, as far as I'm concerned. Is that
So
right?
it's not existing businesses, it's new licenses that are coming in. Is there?
So if an existing licensed business wants to make a variation, this is not going to change anything at all. No, little or no impact. But if you make a new application or variation to a licensed premises within one of these areas, you ought to have some regard to public health related issues, and that's it. Martin wants to come in as well.
Just want to add that in the previous policy, 4.7 did have a list, which was East Bridgeford, Bingham and Congreve. And what public health have done is with a greater data set, they've just added a few more to that. We don't see or recognise any harm that's been done to any premises in the last 5 years, and we don't see why there would be any harm or prejudice moving forward.
Thank you. So to clarify, then, this is just an adaptation of what we'd already done, but it's because the data's changed, we've included different areas. Definitely. And then Councillor Grocott wanted to come in.
I think it's fair to say that public health is raising in its profile in relating to these kind of policies. So, and I think it's I think we're sharing around these journals of licensing in terms of kind of what's hot topics in terms of licensing. And I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't be surprising to see public health as being a licensing objective at some point in the future.
Councillor Grocott. But if we haven't established the causality between licensing and the public health issues in these areas, why is it mentioned? Why are these areas specifically mentioned within this policy? If there's had been no impact to date, Jeff, that's good, and I get that. But it's not to say that there couldn't potentially be an impact if a potential licensee has to consider the public health impact in relating to their area because it happens to be listed in some public health stats, which may well be out of date. So I'm in a position where I actually move that this is taken out. I don't think we should have a list of areas within the policy. Thank you. Yeah, I take it that's a proposer that you want to that amendment strike. Does anyone want to second that? Go on.
My question was, it's all about this data that says that this is an area to watch. What's in that data? Because there could be so many different things. It could be people with high alcohol and drug use because they're abusing at home. Is there anything like crime? So you were saying about pub after pub after pub. Well, how many incidents were the police called out to there? How many times did an ambulance have to come and pick someone up off the street? How many times was there broken glass that was an issue to clear up? Those are all factors which identify areas of concern. And this is just a mysterious data set that we don't know how it's come to. There's just bright red blobs on a map that say, ooh, look out, that might be a problem area.
I take it, is that a second?
Well, it was kind of a question, but yes, let's morph it into a second. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so we have it proposed and seconded. So we'll, rather than do this by, I mean, this seems to be the one topic that everybody, that people have an issue with that's been moved. So we'll take a show of hands as to if people are content to have that particular part of the amendment taken off. Keir, Councillor Jewett.
Thank you, Phil. Just want some clarity, really. Exactly what we're striking off, what section? And I know there's several paragraphs, but are we striking it all off? Just a section?
As
That's just clarification. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So purely the list of areas is what you're asking to have stricken off. 4.8.
4.8.
Yes. So you're not asking
It would have impact on 4.9 as well.
Yeah. So if we strike 4.8, obviously 4.9 is the bit that requires license applicants to have consideration. I mean, can that be? Would you be content to have that genericized to licensees should have what's the word? Consideration for alcohol-related harm in their area when they're opening up, because I think that's a fairly sensible for all licensed premises, and they should have consideration to the harm they cause. So if that can be amended just to be generic, and if that's voted on, and the section I'll just try to clarify exactly what we're voting on. So striking 4.8. I got carried away with myself, Chair. Sorry. Striking 4.8 and amending 4.9 to apply generally across the borough. Unanimous then. Thank you. That was everybody. So if with that the case, then we'll move to with that amendment in place, could we go to the vote on accepting the rest of the recommendations or endorse the rest of these recommendations from us as a licensing committee? And we'll just go to a vote on that then, please, with a show of hands. Everyone content to accept the rest of them? And again, that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. That brings our meeting to a close. And I understand we'll turn off the